There is something about watching a teenager stand in a courtroom, hearing a judge hand down a sentence that will outlast everything they have ever known. They are old enough to understand what they did, but young enough that you cannot help but wonder how they even got there. Some of them cry, some of them stare at the floor, and some of them barely react at all. And the sentences they received meant they probably never would, at least not on the outside. Tristan Vanderliss. On the 9th of April 2011, in the Dutch town of Alphen aan den Rijn, a 24-year-old named Tristan Vanderliss walked into the Ridderhof shopping mall on a Saturday morning and opened fire. He was wearing camouflage pants, a bulletproof vest, and carried a semi-automatic rifle, a .45 caliber pistol, and a .44 Magnum revolver. He fired over 100 rounds. He killed 6 people and wounded 17 others before fatally shooting himself. Police found a note in his car threatening bombings at other malls, and his mother found a suicide note at their apartment. Vanderliss had a documented history of mental illness, including paranoid schizophrenia. He had been admitted to a psychiatric facility in 2006 after a previous attempt on his own life. And yet, local police granted him a firearms license in 2008 and renewed it in both 2009 and 2010 without checking his psychiatric records. He was also obsessed with the Columbine High School shooting. He chose April 9th because it was what would have been shooter Eric Harris's 30th birthday, and he opened fire at 12:08 p.m. because that was the time Harris died. Because Vanderliss took his own life at the scene, there was no trial or sentencing. But the case triggered a massive legal battle. In 2019, the Supreme Court of the Netherlands ruled that police were at fault for issuing a firearms license to someone with a clear history of severe mental illness, and they were held liable for damages suffered by the victims and their families. This case does not end with a life sentence. It ends with a man who never stood before a judge, but whose actions led to a country re-examining who should be trusted with a firearm. Kyle Rittenhouse.
There have been numerous occasions during this trial where they've opened the door. The one time when they're going into Mr. Rosenbaum's prior reason he doesn't like guns.
On the 25th of August, 2020, during civil unrest in Kenosha, Wisconsin, following the police shooting of Jacob Blake, a 17-year-old from Antioch, Illinois, named Kyle Rittenhouse armed himself with an AR-15-style semi-automatic rifle and traveled to the city, saying he wanted to protect businesses from damage. That night, Rittenhouse shot 3 men, killing 2 and wounding the 3rd. Joseph Rosenbaum, 36, was shot 4 times after chasing Rittenhouse and lunging for his weapon. Anthony Huber, 26, was fatally shot after striking Rittenhouse with a skateboard. Gage Grosskreutz, 26, survived but was shot in the arm as he approached with a handgun drawn. The case became one of the most politically divisive trials in recent American history. Prosecutors argued Rittenhouse was the aggressor who provoked the confrontations and had no business being there with a rifle. The defense argued self-defense, saying he was chased and attacked and used the force necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm. Rittenhouse took the stand during the trial and broke down in tears as he began to describe the moments before the first shooting. That emotional reaction became one of the most widely shared clips of the entire case, with some calling it genuine and others accusing him of performing for the jury. After deliberating for roughly 3.5 days, the jury acquitted Rittenhouse on all 5 charges, including first-degree intentional homicide and first-degree reckless homicide. He was found not guilty on every count. The verdict divided the country. Gun rights supporters praised the outcome, while gun control advocates said it sent a dangerous message about armed vigilantism. Cameron Herrin. In May 2018, an 18-year-old named Cameron Herrin had just graduated from Tampa Catholic School and received a brand new Ford Mustang as a graduation gift from his parents. 2 days later, he and his 17-year-old friend, John Barano, were street racing on Bayshore Boulevard in Tampa, Florida. The speed limit was 45 miles per hour. Herrin was going over 100. Jessica Reisinger Raubenold, a 24-year-old mother visiting Tampa from Ohio, was pushing her 21-month-old daughter Lilia in a stroller across Bayshore when Herrin's Mustang slammed into them. Jessica was thrown at least 40 feet. The stroller and baby landed about 70 feet away. Jessica was pronounced dead at the hospital. Little Lilia died the following day. Herrin pleaded guilty to 2 counts of vehicular homicide and unlawful racing. In April 2021, a judge sentenced him to 24 years in prison, 6 years short of the maximum. The judge cited Herrin's prior history of excessive speeding as a factor. But what happened after sentencing is almost as notable as the case itself. Clips of Herrin's reaction in court went massively viral, particularly on TikTok, where users began posting under the hashtag #JusticeForCameronHerrin. Many focused on his appearance, sympathizing with him because of how young he looked, seemingly overlooking the fact that a mother and her baby were killed. The campaign was widely criticized, and some experts suggested that much of the activity may have been driven by bots. Herrin appealed his sentence, but it was upheld in 2022. A subsequent motion for a reduction was also denied. His co-defendant, Barino, received only 6 years through a plea deal. Jake Davison.
Linked to mass killings. Just 22 days ago, Davison was discussing US shooting sprees.
On the evening of the 12th of August 2021, in the Keyham area of Plymouth, England, a 22-year-old named Jake Davison walked out of his home and shot his 51-year-old mother, Maxine, during an argument. He then went outside and kept going. Over the next 8 minutes, he killed 4 more people in the surrounding streets and a nearby park. Sophie Martin, 3 years old, was shot alongside her father, Lee Martin, 43. Stephen Washington, 59, was shot in the park. Kate Shepherd, 66, was shot on a nearby road and died later at the hospital. Davison also wounded 2 others before turning the gun on himself. It was the deadliest mass shooting in Britain in over a decade, and it happened in a country where gun violence of this kind is almost unheard of. In the months leading up to the attack, Davison had been posting extensively online. He had a YouTube channel where he made rants about women and spoke about feeling like an outcast. His posts showed clear connections to incel ideology, a movement built around resentment and entitlement. He described himself as someone who had always been denied a normal life, though he stopped short of openly claiming the label. What made the case even more alarming was that Davison had previously had his firearms license revoked in December 2020 after assault allegations. But police returned his shotgun and his certificate in July 2021, just weeks before the attack. The independent watchdog later investigated and confirmed that the decision to return his license was a serious mistake. Davison died at the scene, so no trial ever took place, but the shooting prompted sweeping reviews of how Britain handles firearms licensing for people with documented mental health concerns. Tori Adamczyk and Brian Draper.
A reasonable doubt that Adamczyk was guilty of first-degree murder.
On the 22nd of September 2006, 16-year-old Cassie Jo Stoddard was house-sitting for her aunt and uncle at their home in Pocatello, Idaho. Her boyfriend came by earlier that evening, along with 2 classmates, Tori Adamczyk and Brian Draper, also both 16. The 4 of them watched a movie together. Then Adamczyk and Draper said they were leaving to catch a film at the theater. But before they left, Draper quietly unlocked the basement door. After Cassie's boyfriend went home, the 2 came back. They had changed into dark clothing and white painted masks. They cut the power to the house, hoping to lure her downstairs. When that did not work, they crept upstairs and attacked her. Cassie fought back. She was stabbed 29 times. 2 days later, her relatives returned home and found her body. Police interviewed Adamczyk and Draper as potential witnesses, and they stuck to their theater alibi, until theater records showed no tickets were purchased that night. Draper eventually led investigators to a spot in Black Rock Canyon where they had buried evidence, including the weapons, their clothing, and a partially burned videotape. Experts were able to recover the tape, and what was on it shocked even seasoned detectives. The footage showed Adamczyk and Draper in the days before and immediately after the murder, giddy and laughing, talking about wanting to become famous killers and comparing themselves to the Columbine shooters. They had been inspired by the 1996 horror film Scream and had made a death list of potential victims. Both were convicted of first-degree murder. In August 2007, they were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Multiple appeals have been filed and denied over the years. They remain incarcerated in Idaho, occasionally crossing paths but no longer speaking to each other. John T. Earnest.
Poway synagogue shooting suspect John Earnest with a stone-cold glare in court as prosecutors...
On the 27th of April 2019, the last day of Passover, a 19-year-old nursing student named John Earnest walked into the Chabad of Poway synagogue near San Diego, armed with an AR-15-style semi-automatic rifle. About 100 people were inside. Earnest opened fire in the foyer, killing 60-year-old Lori Gilbert Kay, who had been there to honor her late mother, and who witnesses said stepped forward to shield the congregation's rabbi from the gunman. He drove a short distance away, then called 911 himself and directed officers to his location. When police arrived, he was leaning against a wall, waiting. What investigators found afterward painted a picture of radicalization that had been building for some time. Earnest had posted an anti-Semitic manifesto online before the attack, citing the Christchurch mosque shooter and the Pittsburgh synagogue shooter as inspiration. He had also set fire to a mosque in nearby Escondido just weeks earlier, while 7 people were sleeping inside. A few weeks before the synagogue attack, he had expressed white supremacist views to classmates and family. Earnest pleaded guilty to all charges in state court and was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus an additional 121 years to life and 16 more years. In December 2021, he also pleaded guilty to 113 federal hate crime counts and received a second consecutive life sentence in federal court, plus 30 additional years. McKenzie Shirilla.
This trial is a culmination of decisions made by one person, the defendant. Those decisions have forever altered the futures of 3 families, and of you also, McKenzie. And your decisions forever robbed Dominic and Davison of the futures that they had before known. If there is one thing that can be taken away from this case, as painful as it is this. Every decision we make is important. Every action we make is important. Regardless of whether the decision is a good one or a bad one, or the actions are good or not, the result is the same. The consequences ripple through time and affect many more people than one might think at the time of the decision. In criminal cases, the state carries the greatest burden under our law, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. As I previously stated, I considered all the evidence presented, and at this point I would like to comment specifically on Exhibit 802, the crash video. This is the type of evidence you can never unsee. You can never forget the visual or audio of this exhibit. It is chilling and tragic. As you review that exhibit, you know that you are watching the oncoming deaths of 2 people, and there is nothing that will stop it. The video clearly shows the purpose and intent of the defendant. She chose a course of death and destruction that day. Exhibit 802 crystallizes the deadly decision-making of the defendant. She morphs from a responsible driver to literal hell on wheels as she makes her way down the street. McKenzie alone made the decision to drive the car, to drive an obscure...
In the summer of 2022, 17-year-old McKenzie Shirilla was behind the wheel of her Toyota Camry in Strongsville, Ohio. Her boyfriend, 20-year-old Dominic Russo, was in the passenger seat, and their friend, 19-year-old Davion Flanagan, sat in the back. It was around 5:30 inches the morning on July 31st when the 3 left a friend's house. According to prosecutors, McKenzie drove down a side street at over 100 miles per hour and slammed directly into a brick building. There was no braking, no swerving. The car split in 2 on impact. First responders found all 3 unconscious and trapped, with McKenzie's foot still pressing the gas pedal. Dominic and Davion were pronounced dead at the scene. McKenzie survived with severe injuries, broken bones, and was airlifted to the hospital. Prosecutors argued it was intentional. They pointed to the volatile relationship McKenzie had with Dominic. In the weeks before the crash, she had allegedly threatened to wreck the car while he was inside it. Multiple witnesses described their relationship as toxic, with McKenzie reportedly degrading him and damaging his property, and one detail really stuck with the judge. During the investigation, McKenzie asked if they could just suspend her license for 10 years, as if driving privileges were the bigger concern here, not the 2 lives that had just been lost. In August 2023, Judge Nancy Margaret Russo found McKenzie guilty of all 12 felony charges, including 4 counts of murder. She called McKenzie literal hell on wheels and said she had a mission and executed it with precision. McKenzie was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. She broke down crying in the courtroom, calling Dominic her soulmate. Her appeal was denied. Aiden Fucci.
That Snapchat that you did was not very smart.
No. Now we have people want to burn our house down, our cars down. Because of that Snapchat thing you did. It's all over, you're all over the internet and everywhere. Social media.
It is on social media. You'll probably come stay with me after we get done with this. Just for your well, safe being.
This is serious, man.
It's very serious.
This isn't no joke. This is your whole life. Your whole life.
And hers.
And ours. And your brothers and sisters. And don't forget they can't go to school alone.
Why?
Because the kids will hurt them.
On the 9th of May, 2021, Mother's Day, a 13-year-old cheerleader named Tristan Bailey went missing from her neighborhood in St. Johns County, Florida. Her family reported her missing that morning. By the evening, a resident found her body in the woods near a retention pond. She had been stabbed 114 times. 49 of those wounds were defensive, meaning she fought back with everything she had. A residential security camera captured Tristan walking around at 1:45 inches the morning with a 14-year-old schoolmate named Aiden Fucci. A later recording showed Fucci running alone in the opposite direction, shoes in his hand. But before he was even a suspect, Fucci did something that would follow him through the entire case. He took a selfie in the back of a police car, flashed a peace sign, and posted it to Snapchat with a caption asking if anyone had seen Tristan lately. Investigators searched his home and found bloody clothes in his room. A knife with a broken tip was recovered near the pond where Tristan was found, and the missing fragment was discovered during her autopsy, embedded in her scalp. Before the killing, Fucci had told people he wanted to stab someone to death in the woods. The judge later said that while he did not know exactly when Fucci decided it would be Tristan, the intent to kill someone had clearly been there. His mother was later charged separately with evidence tampering for washing blood off his jeans while he was being questioned. In February 2023, just before jury selection, Fucci pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for a sentencing review after 25 years. The judge called it the most difficult and shocking case St. Johns County had ever dealt with. Willard, Miller, and Jeremy Goodale.
That the defendant, Willard Noble Chaden Miller, should be sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 35 years.
That's 17-year-old Willard Miller being sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his Spanish teacher, Noema Graber, who he killed because of a bad grade. We highlight the victim impact statements and talk to the prosecutor who helped put him behind bars. I'm Anjanette Levy. Welcome to Law and Crime's Sidebar Podcast. Willard Miller is a teenager from Iowa, and he is beginning this week serving a life sentence in prison for murder. So many of the cases we cover are senseless, and this one is even more so. A high school Spanish teacher, 66-year-old Noema Graber, was likely nearing retirement when Miller and his friend beat her to death over a bad grade. Miller was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after he serves 35 years. That doesn't mean he'll be released at that time. He'll simply be given a chance to appear in front of the parole board to see if he's fit to re-enter society. Noema Graber was a Spanish teacher at Fairfield High School in Fairfield, Iowa. Willard Miller was one of her students. After Miller received a bad grade from Graber, he and his friend Jeremy Goodale plotted to kill her. According to the state's account of events, Noema Graber drove to a park in Fairfield after school to go on a walk. It was something she did often. On November 2nd, 2021, Miller and Goodale sneaked up on Graber and beat her to death with a baseball bat. Graber's body was found the next day under a tarp, a wheelbarrow, and a railroad tie.
On the 2nd of November 2021, in the small town of Fairfield, Iowa, a 66-year-old high school Spanish teacher named Noema Graber went for her regular afternoon walk through Chautauqua Park. She never came home. Her body was found hidden under a tarp and a wheelbarrow in a wooded area of the park. She had been beaten to death with a baseball bat. Within hours, police arrested two of her students, 16-year-old Willard Miller and 16-year-old Jeremy Goodale. So what was the motive? According to investigators, Miller was frustrated with how Graber taught her Spanish class and was upset that the grade was bringing down his GPA. He was worried it could affect his chances of going on an overseas study trip, and instead of asking for extra credit or talking to a counselor, Miller and Goodale planned an ambush. They stalked her walking route beforehand, brought a wheelbarrow and a baseball bat, and waited for her in the park. Each teen told a different version of who actually swung the bat. Goodale told police that Miller wanted Graber dead because he was failing her class and that Miller was the one who planned it. Miller claimed he was just the lookout and that Goodale carried out the killing. But the evidence showed they both played a role. They conspired together, they showed up together, and they hid her body together. Both pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. Miller was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 35 years. The judge said he found Miller's intent and actions to be sinister and evil. Goodale was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Both were ordered to pay $150,000 in restitution to Graber's family. Rachel Shoaf and Sheila Eddy. On the night of the 5th of July, 2012, 16-year-old Skylar Neese snuck out her bedroom window in Star City, West Virginia, and climbed into a car with her two best friends, Rachel Shoaf and Sheila Eddy. She never came back. Her parents reported her missing the next day, and for months, nobody could figure out what happened. Eddy even helped the Neese family hand out missing flyers. Both girls were questioned repeatedly, but their stories matched, and there was no body. Then, in January 2013, about 6 months later, Shoaf suffered a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized. After 5 days, she asked to be driven to her attorney's office, where she confessed. She told investigators that she and Eddy had planned the whole thing. They picked up Skylar that night, drove her about 30 miles across the state line into Greene County, Pennsylvania, and stabbed her with kitchen knives they had hidden in their clothing. They brought a shovel and clean clothes, but could not dig into the hard ground, so they covered Skylar's body with branches in a ditch where it lay undiscovered until Shoaf led police back to the spot. When asked why, Shoaf's answer became one of the most infamous lines in any true crime case. She said they killed Skylar because they just didn't like her anymore. She later revealed in court that she and Eddy had been in a secret romantic relationship and were worried Skylar might expose them. Shoaf pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 30 years with eligibility for parole after 10 years. Eddy pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and received life with the possibility of parole after 15 years. The two are now housed in the same facility in West Virginia. Cruz.
I am very sorry for what I did, and I have to live with it every day. And that if I were to get a second chance, I will do everything in my power to try to help others. And I am doing this for you, and I do not care if you do not believe me. And I love you, and I know you don't believe me, but I have to live with this every day. And it brings me nightmares, and I can't live with myself sometimes, but I try to push through because I know that's what you guys would want me to do. I hate drugs, and I believe this country would do better if everyone would stop smoking marijuana and doing all these drugs and causing racism and violence out in the streets. I'm sorry, and I can't even watch TV anymore. And I'm trying my best to maintain my composure, and I just want you to know I'm really sorry. And I hope you give me a chance to try to help others. If I believe it's your decision to decide where I go and whether I live or die. Not the jury's. I believe it's your decision. I'm sorry.
On the 14th of February 2018, Valentine's Day, a 19-year-old named Nicholas Cruz arrived at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, by Uber. He walked in 20 minutes before dismissal carrying an AR-15-style semi-automatic rifle, and for about 6 minutes, he moved through the hallways of the freshman building, firing into classrooms. He killed 14 students and 3 staff members and wounded 17 others. It remains the deadliest mass shooting at a high school in United States history. After the attack, Cruz dropped his rifle and backpack and escaped the campus by blending in with students who were running for their lives. He was arrested about an hour later in nearby Coral Springs after stopping at a Walmart and a McDonald's. Cruz had a long history of behavioral and mental health issues going back to preschool. He was transferred between schools 6 times in 3 years. His adoptive father had died when he was 5, and his adoptive mother passed in November 2017, just 3 months before the attack, leaving him orphaned. In October 2021, Cruz pleaded guilty to all 34 counts. Prosecutors sought the death penalty, and the sentencing trial ran from July to October 2022. His defense argued that fetal alcohol spectrum disorder caused brain damage after his biological mother abused drugs and alcohol during pregnancy. The jury voted 9-3 in favor of execution, but Florida law at the time required a unanimous verdict. Because 3 jurors voted to spare his life, the recommendation became life without parole. On the 2nd of November 2022, Cruz was formally sentenced to 34 consecutive life sentences without parole. Many victims' families were devastated and felt the sentence was insufficient for what he had done. Ethan Crumbley.
Oh, you all right? Here, you all right? Yeah. All right, fine.
On the 30th of November 2021, a 15-year-old named Ethan Crumbley walked out of a bathroom at Oxford High School in suburban Detroit, Michigan, carrying a 9mm handgun his father had purchased for him 4 days earlier as an early Christmas gift. He moved through the hallways and fired at students and staff, killing 4 classmates and wounding 6 students and a teacher. The victims were Madison Baldwin, 17, Tate Meyer, 16, Hannah Street, Juliana, 14, and Justin Schilling, 17. What made this case even more disturbing was what investigators found in Crumbley's journal. He had planned the shooting weeks in advance and chose the weapon to cause the most damage. The judge revealed that Crumbley told Justin Schilling to get on his knees before shooting him at point-blank range, and that he shot Hannah Street Juliana a second time after she was already down. But this case went beyond the shooter. That morning, a teacher flagged a disturbing drawing Crumbley made showing a gun, a bullet, a bleeding figure, and the words, "The thoughts won't stop, help me." His parents, James and Jennifer Crumbley, were called to the school but refused to take him home. They also failed to mention that they had just bought him a handgun. Crumbley pleaded guilty to all 24 charges. At his sentencing in December 2023, he told the court he was a really bad person and asked the judge to give him whatever sentence the families wanted. Judge Kwame Rowe sentenced him to life without parole, calling the shooting a true act of terrorism. His parents were both later convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 to 15 years each, the first time parents were ever held criminally responsible for their child's mass shooting. Alec McKinney.
2 suspects are in custody, 18-year-old Devon Erickson and a 16-year-old teenage girl who prefers to be called Alec McKinney. Both are now being charged as adults.
On the 7th of May 2019, 2 students at STEM School Highlands Ranch in Douglas County, Colorado, walked into their school carrying handguns and other weapons hidden in a guitar case and a backpack. They opened fire in classroom 107, where students had been watching The Princess Bride in the dark. The attack killed 18-year-old Kendrick Castillo and injured 8 others. Castillo had only 3 days left before graduation. He was shot and killed while rushing one of the gunmen, trying to protect his classmates. He has been called a hero by virtually everyone connected to the case. The 2 shooters were 16-year-old Alec McKinney and 18-year-old Devon Erickson. McKinney, who was born female and identifies as male, told investigators that he had planned the attack because of repeated bullying over his gender identity. He said he wanted the kids at the school to experience bad things and suffer from trauma the way he had. Before heading to the school, the pair broke into Erickson's parents' gun safe with a crowbar and an axe and took 3 handguns and a rifle. McKinney pleaded guilty in February 2020 to 17 charges, including first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years, plus an additional 38 years on the other charges. Because he was a juvenile, life without parole was not an option. At his sentencing, he apologized individually to each of his victims. He said he did not want leniency and told anyone planning a school shooting to get help instead. Castillo's father responded by saying he would never forgive McKinney and condemned him. His co-defendant, Devon Erickson, went to trial and was convicted on 46 counts. Erickson received life without parole plus 1,282 years, the longest sentence in Douglas County history. Michael Bever.
Neely, this sentencing only took about 5 minutes. Michael Bever was wearing an orange jumpsuit today, and he looked like he'd lost about 10 pounds since the last time we saw him. But there were no tears when the judge told him that he'd likely never get out of prison.
On the night of the 22nd of July 2015, in a quiet neighborhood in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, a 12-year-old called 911 from inside the family home on Magnolia Court. The caller was hard to understand, clearly in distress. When officers arrived, they found a 13-year-old girl outside covered in stab wounds. She had identified her brothers as the ones who attacked her. Inside, police discovered 5 bodies. The victims were David Bever, 52, April Bever, 44, and 3 of their children, Daniel, 12, Christopher, 7, and Victoria, 5. All had been stabbed repeatedly. A 2-year-old was found unharmed in a crib. The brothers had simply forgotten about her. The 2 responsible were Robert Bever, 18, and Michael Bever, 16. Investigators later learned the brothers had been planning the attack for at least a year. Their goal, according to court documents, was to murder their entire family and then flee the state to carry out mass shootings in public, hoping to become famous. They had stockpiled knives in the house for months. Robert Bever pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms without parole. Michael went to trial. He did not testify, but his attorney argued that he had been manipulated by his older brother and had a troubled home life marked by isolation. The family was described as deeply secluded, rarely seen by neighbors. The jury found Michael guilty on 5 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms in August 2018 with the possibility of parole, meaning he would technically be eligible to apply in the future. In court, he said he woke up at night, still expecting to go ask one of his little brothers a question. 3 years later, still unable to believe it had actually happened. Paris Bennett.
Do you remember what happened after the emergency services turned up at the house?
I remember that a male officer walking past me and into the bedroom.
On the night of the 4th of February, 2007, Charity Lee left for her shift at Buffalo Wild Wings in Abilene, Texas, and asked a college student to babysit her kids, 13-year-old Paris and 4-year-old Ella. Around 10 p.m., Paris convinced the babysitter to go home early, telling her he was fine on his own. Once she was gone, he walked into Ella's bedroom while she was asleep and stabbed her 17 times. He then called a friend on the phone and talked for 6 minutes before dialing 911 to confess. When his mother arrived, she was told her daughter was dead and her son was in custody. Paris had initially claimed that a hallucination made Ella look like a demon. He later admitted the truth. He had planned to kill his mother that night, but changed his mind because he realized that dying quickly was not enough of a punishment. If he killed Ella instead and went to prison, his mother would spend the rest of her life suffering the loss of both her children at once. Mental health evaluations found Paris had a reported IQ of 141 and met the criteria for psychopathy and significant antisocial traits. Professionals noted he had experienced homicidal thoughts since childhood. Because he was 13 at the time of the crime, the minimum age to be tried as an adult in Texas was 14, so his case went through juvenile court. He pleaded guilty to capital murder in 2009. The judge sentenced him to 40 years in prison, the maximum available under Texas juvenile law, with eligibility for parole after 20 years. He was transferred to adult prison when he turned 19. His first parole hearing is scheduled for 2027. If parole is never granted, his release date falls in 2047. Aaron Campbell.
Aaron Thomas Campbell, you were found guilty of the abduction, rape and murder of Alicia McPhail, a 6-year-old child.
On the night of the 2nd of July 2018, Alicia McPhail, a 6-year-old girl from Airdrie, Scotland, was staying at her father's home on the Isle of Bute for the summer. The family's front door had been left unlocked. At around 2 inches the morning, a 16-year-old named Aaron Campbell entered the home, found Alicia asleep, picked her up, and carried her half a mile to the grounds of a demolished hotel. There, he raped her and killed her by applying pressure to her face and neck. She was found by a member of the public hours later. Her body had 117 separate injuries. Campbell had initially gone to the house to steal cannabis from Alesha's father, with whom he had a prior drug transaction. He had been texting the father about a debt that same night. Getting no response, he walked over. He was caught partly because his own mother reviewed CCTV footage she had installed outside their home and noticed her son leaving and returning during the hours Alesha disappeared. Campbell was arrested and denied everything. At trial, he blamed the father's girlfriend, claiming she had framed him. The jury took less than an hour to convict him unanimously. When psychological reports were prepared before sentencing, Campbell admitted his guilt to assessors and described having had violent urges for some time. The judge described him as cold, callous, calculating, and remorseless. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 27 years. An appeal reduced that to 24 years because the court found the original sentence had not made adequate allowance for his youth. He will be eligible to apply for parole in 2042 when he is 40 years old. Devon Erickson.
The murder trial for accused STEM school shooter Devon Erickson entered its third day of testimony this morning. Erickson admits being one of the shooters in the deadly incident at STEM School Highlands Ranch 2 years ago. Body camera footage shown in court today shows Douglas County deputies moving through the school and eventually finding the other suspect in the shooting, Alec McKinney. The video shows officers detain McKinney and search him for weapons.
Devon Erickson's name came up briefly when we covered the STEM School Highlands Ranch shooting through Alec McKinney, but Erickson's own path through the courts looked very different. While McKinney pleaded guilty and cooperated with prosecutors, Erickson took his case to trial and fought the charges. When the shooting happened on the 7th of May, 2019, Erickson was 18. He and McKinney walked into the school armed with handguns hidden in a guitar case and a backpack, and opened fire in a darkened classroom where students had been watching a movie. Kendrick Castillo, 18, was shot and killed while rushing Erickson to stop the attack. Castillo had 3 days left before graduation. At trial, Erickson's defense argued that McKinney had forced and manipulated him into participating, and that staged videos making it look like McKinney was the one being pressured were fabricated for that exact purpose. McKinney testified against Erickson for the prosecution, saying Erickson had been a full and willing participant and that the coercion narrative was a cover story they planned together. The jury sided with the prosecution. Erickson was convicted on 46 counts, including first-degree murder, attempted murder, and conspiracy. At his sentencing in September 2021, Judge Teresa Slade noted that the first time she saw any emotion from Erickson in the courtroom was when his family spoke about what he would lose. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 1,282 years on the remaining charges. It was the longest sentence in Douglas County history. Caleb Sharp.
The pain to end for all of you, or at least subside.
40 years to life behind bars. That is the sentence for Freeman High School shooter Caleb Sharp, who killed one student and injured 3 others nearly 5 years ago.
Sorry to everybody who I stole their innocence and high school experience.
And for the first time, a public apology from the gunman himself.
On the 13th of September, 2017, 15-year-old Caleb Sharp boarded a school bus at Freeman High School in Rockford, Washington, carrying a duffel bag. Inside the bag was an AR-15 rifle, a handgun, and multiple boxes of 223 ammunition. He went straight to a second-floor hallway, set down the bag, and pulled out the rifle to begin loading it. But the weapon jammed. As Sharp struggled with it, a 15-year-old classmate named Sam Strahan walked toward him. Strahan looked at Sharp and told him he had always known he was going to shoot up the school and that it was going to get him in trouble. Sharp pulled the handgun from under his coat and shot Strahan in the stomach. As Strahan fell forward, Sharp shot him again in the face. He then continued down the hall and shot 3 girls who were running to get away. Sam Strahan died from his wounds. The 3 girls survived. A school custodian confronted Sharp with his hands raised, and Sharp surrendered. Sharp pleaded guilty to premeditated first-degree murder and 3 counts of attempted murder. At his sentencing in August 2022, he apologized publicly for the first time, 5 years after the attack. The judge sentenced him to 40 years to life, calling it the true cost of evil. That sentence was later appealed and reduced. The Washington State Court of Appeals ruled that because Sharp was under 16 at the time of the crime, State law required a minimum of 25 years rather than 40. He was resentenced in September 2024 to 25 years to life. Sam Strahan's mother has attended every court hearing. She has said the wounds from that day will never be over, no matter how many times she is asked to return to a courthouse.